very much. Great. So, Rekha, I think we are good to go if you are.
Yes, I am.
All right.
Okay, let me kick the session off. Mr. Pati Singhania, Mr. Anant Maheshwari, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to have you with us in yet another edition of AIMA's very popular Leaders Speak program. After quite some time, I think everybody was enjoying the New Year's. Uh, Anand, we have a lot of young people also along with the normal AIMA members. I think it's you and the Microsoft name which has attracted a lot of young people, and we are very happy about that. We have AIMA has a Young Leaders Council, and it's great to have them on board for an event which is going. We have people from all ages literally for this event, so great to have you with us. Um, just to tell you something about the Leaders Speak series, we really started this program during the lockdown because we felt we needed to communicate with our members, and we aimed at bringing iconic leaders to our members digitally. And we have been doing just that with over 35 such programs which have been organized in the last few months since the lockdown. And today we have you, another iconic leader, and a very special guest. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anant Maheshwari, President Microsoft India, with whom we'll have a conversation on digital skilling. Mr. Singhania, always a pleasure to have you with us. Many thanks for agreeing to moderate this very special session with Anand. You yourself are very passionate about skill development, and this should be an exciting session for all of us. Thank you for joining us, and a very warm welcome to you. Anant, it's a pleasure to have you with us I think for the very first time on the AIMA platform, if I'm not mistaken. I hope the first of many such interactions going forward. As mentioned earlier, in this program, we interact with distinguished leaders from India and overseas who are shaping the post-COVID world with their initiative and influence. Microsoft has played a vital role in enabling remote work since the COVID outbreak, and you're one of the key drivers of Microsoft's global program to train 25 million people in digital skills. You've shown exemplary corporate citizenship by offering free digital lessons to Indian workers and helping Indian schools with tools and training for online education. Thank you for joining us, and once again, a very warm welcome to you. Ladies and gentlemen, Indian business and consumers have gone at an astonishing rate during the past year, and for a large number of organizations, digital has become the preferred way to operate even after the reopening of the economy. This makes it necessary for everyone to have the skills to do all or some part of their work remotely. Both organizations and workers can no longer defer investment in digital tools and skills. However, the bulk of the workforce has minimal access to digital know-how, and we are facing a situation where enterprises want to go digital, but they lack the workforce to do so. Clearly, jobs are now going to the digitally skilled, whereas those who are unable to keep up are becoming redundant. India faces a new skill crisis in the post COVID world, and companies like Microsoft have to make a big contribution to help the country change from a mostly physical economy to a mostly digital economy. We are delighted to have you with us today, Anand, to tell us what Microsoft's skilling plans and strategies are. I now invite Mr. Singhania to take over the session. Over to you, Mr. Singhania.
Thank you, Rekha. Thank you very much for those initial introductions. Mr. Maheshwari, pleasure to have you with us this evening. Rekha, ladies and gentlemen, delighted once again to be here with you as part of the AIMA's Leaderspeak program. And once again, we are delighted we have somebody like Mr. Maheshwari who's agreed to do this session with us. Under your leadership, Microsoft has made tremendous contribution to India's digitization program. And your initiatives during COVID have helped Indian enterprises and students overcome the challenges of lockdown. I mean, this is the most ubiquitous thing. And you couldn't have been, nobody's saying that COVID was good, but you couldn't have been more handy, if I may say, at this point in time than anything else. You are a major ally of the government in its digital administration and skilling programs, and recently Microsoft India has been enlisted by the government for providing free digital content and future-ready skills to ITI students. Wonderful. Now, before Microsoft, of course, for those who don't know, Mr. Maheshwari was in Honeywell, with Honeywell in India, and also worked with McKinsey. Therefore, it's a privilege to have somebody with your experience in India's technology sector for this session and the digital skilling agenda and the future of work. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID pandemic and the stalling of the economy have caused large-scale unemployment. While some jobs have come back as the economy reopens, many jobs still hang by a thread because of the sweeping shift to digitalization. The en masse switch to online commerce and remote work has required almost everyone to have at least basic proficiency in using digital devices and applications. The shock of disruption has convinced enterprises to make the switch to digital existence permanent. The expanse of the physical economy has shrunk rapidly, and the field is tilted in favor of the digital economy. Therefore, workforce needs digital skilling instantly, if I may say. More importantly, young Indians coming through the education and skilling system need to be equipped for a rapidly transforming economy. I want to say one other thing. Just this morning, I was on a call with several people from the Asia Pacific countries. One of the key challenges that we were talking about was the medium and small scale sector. And people were feeling that they really are the ones who need digital skilling the most, because organized businesses are somehow able to adapt more quickly to the digital world. But it is the MSME sectors, which particularly in a country like India, and the same with all our Asian neighbors, really provides anywhere from 70 to 80% of the employment that is there. And if they are not digitally equipped and skilled, that is going to be a very large portion that is going to be left behind and will form major casualties. So the future of work is clearly digital. Even the people who earn by doing physical work need to acquire skills to access, log, and share information digitally. As enterprises try to ensure businesses against future disruptions by automating and digitalizing, people will need to learn how to get things done from wherever they are. This new way of working requires a new mindset and a new set of skills. And these skills need to be provided right away. Otherwise, the next business disruption will actually come, ironically, from the shortage of digital skills. Digital aptitude needs to be seeded from the primary schools and not be treated like a commercial skill to be learned only by adults. Literacy's definition needs to be updated for the digital age, and children need to be taught reading, writing, and calculation on digital tools. Children also need to be taught basic application development from an early age. Introducing commercial skills later in life is more costly and less efficient. In any case, given that India's citizenship is now primarily digital, each Indian, young or old, needs to access digital skilling platforms. Mr. Maheshwari is well placed to talk about a lot of this and how these skills can be spread, what we can do, and how he views this entire thing. So before I hand it over to you, Mr. Maheshwari, I do want to put in a small disclaimer on a lighter note. When we talk about doing all this digitally, you do realize that I'm involved with a company that makes paper. So I don't want to say we have any opposing agendas, but so far what we have seen is the more stuff that you do, the more paper that people want to use on a whole lot of other things. But on that lighter note, I'm happy to hand over to you now, Mr. Maheshwari. And once again, welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Singhania, for such a nice setup and a warm welcome. And thank you so much, Rekha, for inviting me to do this session. And I completely appreciate your caveat right up front, Mr. Singhania, because there is even more application of our traditional modes as digital becomes even more widespread. So there's a lot of stuff that comes together as we go forward. So let me just I'll take maybe 20-25 minutes to have a chat. There are some slides that I will walk through, and then after that we'll open it up for Q&A, as that's the format I think, Rekha, that you had suggested. So before I go and talk specifically about skilling, I know a lot has been said in terms of the context of it. What I'll do in my talk is a little bit talk about a concept of technology that all of us are grappling with in as we define what skilling do we really need, and then go out and talk a little bit about digital skilling as we go forward. So before we get going, let me move to the next slide and just share two numbers with all of you: 73% and 4x. Now, you might be wondering what these numbers are and what do they represent. And I'm sure you might be thinking through, hey, listen, what kind of riddle this is. But let me sort of quickly bring that across to you. Data is all around us. It's estimated that in almost all organizations today, roughly about 3/4 of the data that they have is not analyzed. So 3/4 of the data is not analyzed in organizations. And even more importantly, the data that we are producing as a planet is multiplying at such a rate that if you look at the 40 zettabytes of data that existed on the planet as of last year, that's likely to go up by 4x to nearly 175 zettabytes by 2025. And when you look at that problem or that opportunity, whichever way you want to look at it, there is an absolute case for going even more digital. Organizations can no longer succeed today if they don't analyze their data, if they don't work with their data, if they don't bring that data to drive innovation for them, to drive new ways of serving customers for themselves and create new offerings for them. Because data generally gets captured in some silos inside these businesses and really is not put to good use. It may be more reactive use many a time, not proactive use with the data. Organizations do need to create insights from their data and apps and take some very proactive actions at scale to drive more impactful business outcomes. They need to be able to look forward from the entire data estate. They need to continuously derive predictive insights and take proactive action. And this creates a data loop inside, which then becomes self-fulfilling in terms of the opportunity. And that is the context that we will go and understand even more about this concept called tech intensity. So tech intensity is a concept that Satya Nadella had spoken of roughly about 3 years back. And it was very simple equation that he suggested that is applicable for each of us, that is you and me as individuals, and the organizations that we work in. If we truly want to understand why do we need these digital skills, then understanding this concept of tech intensity is a very simple concept, but a very simple equation. But if you understand that, then you can do a lot better in what kind of skills and therefore how to develop them. We can all see today that every place, every industry, every company, all of us have become more digital. Just to take a personal example, imagine and remember what you were doing 5 years back and 10 years back, and your life today as an individual and as a professional, and the amount of skills that you have intuitively picked up over the last 5 to 10 years in driving your own work today. A lot of the work that you do today, even from the simple stuff of the social messaging that we do, or the different kinds of inputs that we get on news on social media. So tech adoption, and I'll talk a little bit about that first, then go to tech capability, and then talk about trust. But the equation is pretty simple. Tech intensity is a product of tech adoption and capability and raised to the power of trust. So I'll walk through each of these elements very clearly. So the big question around tech adoption is basically what platforms do you use and how much do you use of those platforms? So if you ask how we think about tech platforms today, there are a lot of platforms available. To simple ones that you use on a daily basis could be a social chat application. It could be the maps that you use. It could be the search that you use on the internet. It could be a number of applications that you use for your productivity or even to track weather data or any other news that may be coming in for you. These are all platforms. But at work, in organizations also, there are many, many platforms that organizations could adopt. And therefore, how much do you adopt? What platforms you bring in? That's the first question around tech intensity that each of us needs to ask as organizations and as individuals. The second question, and then go into the second concept around tech capability. Now, this part of the equation is very critical as we say that every company is a digital company. Every organization actually has its own secret sauce of how they bring all these platforms that they may have, all the ingredients they may have to create what is unique about that organization. Think of it as if you're in the kitchen, you can give the same set of ingredients to different people who may be cooking, but it's the secret sauce and the process that a lot of people have makes so much difference in terms of what actually comes out as the outcome. So similarly, in organizations, you can provide the same platforms, you can provide the same tools to two different companies doing exactly the same thing, or two different individuals doing exactly the same thing. It's about the tech capabilities that they build uniquely of their own that distinguishes one from the other. So the big question around tech capability is how do you mix the core skills that you may have with tech capability or digital skills? That's the mix that kind of distinguishes you from the next person who may be exactly similar, or your organization from the next organization that may be very similar. So the mix of core skills and the digital skills, and that then defines everybody in the organization. This tech capability can have a multiplier effect on the tech adoption in the organization and go back to that point around usage of data to really drive the organization forward, or yourself and your own capability forward. Let's come to the third part of the equation. As I said earlier, the equation is tech adoption multiplied by tech capability raised to the power of trust. Now, one thing that has happened during the pandemic is that this element of trust has really got amplified. Trust is very, very critical, not just in terms of adopting and building technology, but also how you use it. There are two aspects to the trust. First, trust in the business models. And then when digital technology is transforming every industry and every part of our daily life, trust starts having a lot of different dimensions. Security, we all are aware of, cybersecurity. Reliability of what you see on digital platforms and the data that you use. How do you comply with laws? Everybody today is aware about privacy. It is a fundamental human right. Your data is your data. Ethics, very, very critical. And that's why it's very critical as AI takes even more root in almost everything that we do. How do you drive responsible AI? How do you truly have ethical development of AI? So ethics becomes very, very important in the platforms and the capabilities. And finally, transparency. It's very critical for you to have the control that you should have as you operate with digital platforms. So the big question for trust is, are you building a business today to stand the test of time on trust? And to bring that analogy of what human history has seen already, and what we are witnessing as we go through today is the best analogy I can take is from the industrial revolution that happened, the third industrial revolution, especially second and third, as the manufacturing sort of zone really ramped up across the planet over the last 100 years. It's only in the 60s and the 70s that the planet woke up to the dangers of what could happen to the climate. And then suddenly there's a lot of awareness, and then finally around the end of the last century, laws started to come into place for managing the climate. And a lot of manufacturing industry was really asking the question, when I set up these manufacturing plants, these laws did not exist, and now you're evaluating me with these new laws that have suddenly come into play. Let's not forget, this happened over 50 years. We were assessing companies and organizations on laws that were made much after they had made the investments. Now look at the digital world. This will happen much faster in a very, very compressed time frame. All of us are doing a lot of these business models today. The laws are still getting written around how you will manage your digital estate, how you will manage your digital capabilities going forward. And in a way, trust becomes central because the business models that you create today will get judged by the laws that are still getting written. And within the next few years, you will then ask the question, am I compliant with the laws? So trust becomes very important in thinking through all the elements of digital skilling and digital capability. So let me recap the equation once again for you before I move into the skilling section. Tech intensity is the foundation on which you assess digital skilling and therefore what you need to do. It's a combination of tech adoption and tech capability raised to the power of trust. So as I move into the next section, and I will talk a little bit about how the speed of the digital transformation with tech and skills happens for different organizations and how it creates competitive advantages, let me come back to one more number that may pose a little bit of questions for you, 50%. So the World Economic Forum last year estimated that by 2025, 50% of all working population around the planet will need reskilling. And a lot of it will be digital skilling. Now that's a massive number. This is not talking about skilling somebody who's in school and college right now. This is talking about everybody on this call. This is talking about everybody who's listening to this. This is talking about all the leaders. This is talking about everybody who works with us, for us, who we work for. So it's a massive ecosystem kind of movement that we will have to look at as we look at digital skilling. And therefore, moving to what is digital skilling and how should we think about that framework, it's not just about creating new skills, but it's also the upgradation of skills continuously. So it's a continuous cycle of skilling. And let me take it one by one. So first is, how do you get started? How do you create digital skills in the first place? It, of course, to our training, the schools and the people who have not used these skills before. So even in our colleges, in our trainings, we bring this in. And it has to be a 360-degree approach of skilling the ecosystem. It's starting with schools and educators. It's starting with jobs that don't have digital skills today, but are beginning to have them, to prepare a workforce in India for jobs of the future. It requires truly enabling every segment of the country to succeed in a digital economy. And therefore, it requires work between the government, the industry, the civil society to bring digital resilience in such a time of change to truly acquire skills. I'll take some examples of what is happening to do this today. And some stuff, as Rekha said, to share some of the Microsoft examples of what we are doing, at least in this arena. So we've taken a lot of initiatives to skill schools and teachers in this time for employability. We recently partnered with NASSCOM Future Skills and the MEDI Future Skills project to skill 1 million students in AI by 2021. We also set up the AI digital labs in 10 higher educational institutions of the country to train over 500,000 educators, teachers, who could then impart it to students. And in partnership with the National Skills Development Corporation, NSDC, aiming to provide digital skills to over 1 lakh youth in the country. These are, I know, small drops in the ocean, but this is what every one of us needs to do to at least start creating the digital skills in the country. As Mr. Singhania said right up front, if we don't do this, it could actually be not an opportunity, but a problem. So I think we have to think about it in that way. Then the next one is about the second bit, which is upgrading and continuously working on improving our skills. So it's about creating a system of learning that helps empower everyone sort of pursue lifelong learning. And no single company or enterprise can close the skills gap alone. It's truly a partnership that is required across the ecosystem, across all stakeholders. So over a decade, we have been working very closely with the public, private, and the non-profit sectors in India to create a very vibrant skilling ecosystem in the country that prepares everyone for a tech-enabled future. And some examples of what we are doing there: we regularly run this concept called a Week of AI, which is a specially curated 5-day online program to build AI skills in the developer community. So now these are already IT developers, but as the world moves to AI, they also, IT developers, software developers, need to reskill themselves, upgrade themselves to be ready for AI. So that's the upgradation of skills that even they need. And that's already working to have skilled close to 100,000 developers already. And we are therefore working even more to do this across different companies and the ecosystem. In line with the country's vision of Digital India, we launched the Digital Governance Tech Tour. It's really an initiative, a national initiative working with the government to train 10,000 government officials on artificial intelligence and cloud in a calendar year. And we've also partnered with ISB in Hyderabad to equip leaders of today and tomorrow with tools and strategies to transform their respective organizations to AI-driven organizations. So it's at all levels that we are doing this ISB program that I spoke of. It's for senior executives to come in and retrain themselves or train themselves on AI opportunities. Now, I can keep talking a lot about what is needed, and I'll much rather cover a lot of it in the Q&A that we have after my talk. But I want to bring this concept of skilling to each one of us. I can keep talking about organizations, but it starts with each one of us. And very important to think through, what do I need to do as I look at this transformation that is happening around me? So when I said that number out, 50%, you got to ask yourself, which part of the 50% am I in? Am I reskilling myself, or I am not reskilling myself on digital skills? And if you're really looking at what is needed, you'll be much better served if you're in the 50% that is reskilling ourselves. So we follow at Microsoft a culture which is called a learn it all culture, in which we wake up every day and in a way ask ourselves, what will I learn today? And what will I figure out today that I didn't know when I woke up? So that at least I go back and say, this was useful day in terms of my own growth mindset and how I can be on a continuous learning journey. And it comes to all of us. I can give you one example that I have gone through, and now I do this every year. I try to pick one thing that I have been doing for the last 4 decades of whatever I've learned, drop that thing and pick up a new digital skill as I move forward. I do this pretty much every year, and it really dawned on me 4 years back. I remember, so just to give you a little bit of background, given the background that I've come from, I'm very good at taking notes in all the meetings that I sit, and therefore very sort of critical to remember what I'm doing. But I realized many a time that I was taking these notes, they were kind of locked away in my notebook, and I maybe went back and referred to them once in a while, and when I wanted to go search myself, or I converted them into a memo or an email that I sent out to the entire organization. And then I was sitting with this banking CEO in India, one of the leading banks in the country, and he said, "Listen, I really want everything that's happening to be open. We can accelerate decision making, data to be aware to everyone." And I was doing the same thing in that meeting, and I realized I'm sitting one-on-one with this CEO, and then everything that we're talking will not be known to my team. And on that day, I shifted to starting to take my notes digitally, so that whenever I am taking notes, and I discovered the OneNote as a capability at that point in time, where when I could take notes on that mechanism, my notes were visible to my team, who I had given access to, and therefore they could pretty much learn from what I was writing and convert that into action. And also it worked the other way around, that I could get a lot of continuous information from my team even as I was taking notes. So my meetings became more productive, and my interactions with my entire team and the ecosystem became a lot more productive. And today I've got to that point where I'm still taking a lot of notes, in fact, a lot more than what I used to do in the past, but it's become a highly collaborative and productive way of doing it. So it's really compounding our own learning as we go forward. So I'll leave all of you with 3 questions. And as you think about your own journey on digital skilling, you got to ask yourself, what are you doing for the ecosystem that you are part of? How much are you disrupting yourselves and that ecosystem when it comes to digital skilling? And where are you on your own personal journey, and what needs to change on digital skilling for yourself? Because it starts with each one of us. So thank you so much for listening to me. I'll open it up for the questions, and Mrs. Singhania, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maheshwari. That was very interesting for how you brought the context of this whole thing. And it seems very simple in terms of saying that, look, what are we doing? But it's when you start to put it on pen and paper, or should I say digital notes, it becomes harder, because you've got to think through fairly clearly in terms of what we have here. So thank you very much, Rekha. We do have some past presidents over here, and can I then invite some of our past presidents to come in first and ask Mr. Maheshwari if they have any thoughts around that. I think I saw Mr. Kalra somewhere on this. Krishanji,
can I request admin to unmute the past presidents?
Mr. Kalra, Krishanji, are you here? I think still on the call. I did see you earlier on. You are there. You have to unmute yourself, Krishanji, or can the admin unmute you?
Well, thank you very much, Hershey. I'm very much here.
Yes, thank you. So would you like to make any observation or ask something?
No, thanks a lot. I'm afraid I have no comments to make. I've enjoyed listening to Anant. And,
okay, great.
Right, young leader.
Great. Rekha, who else do we have here? Who's got, because there are some people who had put in some questions out there.
Yeah. So can I read out one of the questions?
Yeah, please do that.
How can organizations reskill employees in digital skills who lack basic digital literacy, especially who were previously not provided digital tools to work with?
Great question. So I think today, as you look at it, there are a number of platforms that are available to help you think through which part of your journey you are totally starting with, and therefore, how do you get to a certain stage and start using even more evolved digital skills. In partnership with LinkedIn, Microsoft has done this and made a lot of that content freely available. So there are videos, there are easy to consume content that is available to learn at different stages and then move forward. Even the Microsoft Learn as a portal starts from the very basics, and there it's free content that's available that you can then go through to get to a higher end digital skills.
There's one question around, as you, with your journey, Mr. Maheshwari, and this is going more into you personally, perhaps. There are some people who want to know, for young people, as your journey from a college student to president of Microsoft, what tips could you offer our younger people?
So I have to say that at least I no longer qualify in the same bracket as this group would be, because looking back over the last 3 decades, as I've seen the transformation in myself, I have to say it's a continuous endeavor to, in a way, shed the past, what may be changing, and learn the new. I kind of work with that continuously on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and on a monthly and annual basis. One thing I carry with me every morning is a little bit of a lookout. What point in the day will I really feel stupid today? When I would actually feel, hey, listen, I didn't know this at all. It could be from one of my team members. It could be in a customer interaction. It could be in an external event like this. You may ask me a question just now that I may not have any clue about or have any answers to. But that will then set me off on a journey to understand that, to discover that a lot more, and then change something in myself so that as I go forward, I don't feel stupid about that anymore. And that, to me, is the growth mindset that we need to carry every day in our lives. And I'll give you a very simple example. When I came from Honeywell to Microsoft, I'll be very candid. I did not know what Microsoft did. I knew that, yes, Microsoft had platforms like Windows and Office, but I really wasn't aware about the business of Microsoft, and definitely not the tech frontiers that Microsoft was at. And I still remember a lot of people, when I was talking to them before coming to the company, I had this question that I don't know if I'll be able to learn all the stuff that Microsoft does. And I think this whole concept of the growth mindset was quite evident in everybody who I spoke to. And they said, hey, listen, as long as you have the desire to learn, we'll provide the opportunity to learn. To bring you up to speed. And I can tell you, over the last 5 years, it's been such a journey of learning. A lot that I spoke of today is stuff that I've learned only in the last few years, and therefore I would say, if I can do this, everybody can.
Well, a great answer to that one. There is one question, and you talked in terms of course, trust. One of the big things that is coming up in terms of AI today that people encounter, or at least are talking about, is this whole issue of ethics. And you did bring it up on your chart, and as one of the points. So the whole issue of ethics in something which is being processed through artificial intelligence, of course, obviously programmed by humans, but it's self-learning, deep learning, and the system learns by itself. How are our technology leaders like Microsoft looking at this whole dilemma, if I may say, and what are the ways that we are trying to adopt to deal with this whole issue?
So very good question, and let me maybe answer it at 2 levels. And there were 2 parts to even as I framed that subject of trust. One is purely around the business model, and then second about what we ask technology to do. I think at Microsoft, the first thing where we begin is the business model. Our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. In there, we are very focused to say, your data is your data. And therefore, we work with companies with this simple understanding that our business model is primarily B2B. We support organizations in enabling their own tech intensity. And that creates that trust between these organizations that we work with as customers and Microsoft, because all of these organizations are very, very clear that Microsoft will continue to support me over a long, long time and is not going to create an existential threat for my own business or who I am. So that business model is very critical as you even start framing the question on ethics. And then as you move forward, we ask the question always, and this is something that our president Brad Smith has raised at a number of levels, and even called for a Geneva Convention on ethics and thinking about responsible AI in a very different way. The question to ask is not what computers can do or what technology can do, but what technology should do. So that's the big question to be asked, and that's what we continuously ask ourselves. And there are many methods that we have in our own processes when we develop any platform, when we develop any offering, as we work with customers. We are very clear that there are certain ethics processes that we have institutionalized within our own ecosystem, so that we are continuously exercising that for even our own company, and therefore we are able to bring that to our customers and partners.
Right. That's very important, and I think this debate or this dialogue, I shouldn't say this debate, this dialogue is going to become even more more relevant, and it will come more to the forefront as the AI engine and the deep learning engines, etc., become stronger and proliferate. One interesting question that has come up is that this whole other dilemma, if I may say, as we go digital, we are getting into much greater automation of things. Now, on the one hand, this brings about great efficiency and convenience. On the other hand, we are talking in terms of the challenge of employment, as in switch from manual to automated or robotic processes. So how do we think about this? How do we think in terms of balancing the need for employment, for jobs, along with the efficiency and the benefits that we can, as a business or even as a society, get through automation and digitization?
So I'll take an example maybe to then answer the question. You're asking a very, very relevant existential question. And this question, as you would agree, Mr. Singhania, has been asked at every industrial revolution. So when the microcontroller was coming through in the middle of last century, people asked this existential question: if computers come in, what will happen to all the people who do maybe the accounting tasks and the basic numerical tasks? There was a big fear that jobs will go away. In fact, what happened with that, manufacturing expanded, trade expanded, financial sectors expanded, government expanded, and a lot of capabilities came together, and new jobs happened. The entire Indian IT industry is a product of that revolution. So if you really take the same example, and I'll go back just in the last 12 months, what has changed fundamentally for the planet? If you go back 12 months before COVID came through, there was this huge debate that you cannot provide healthcare over a remote connection. Doctors need to be in front of the patient to actually provide that healthcare. But I think in the last 12 months, we've discovered that, number one, a lot of tests, data can actually be done remotely, that can be provided to the doctors. And at least in the most basic of situations, a lot of healthcare can be provided in a remote format. And then if you need more detailed evaluation, then you physically may need to go and meet the doctor and the hospital care ecosystem. And I've had this learning actually very specifically from Dr. Shetty, who all of us would know, and his views on this are very unique. And he kind of described it to me. He says, the entire medical science is so finite that you can convert that into a very good AI algorithm. But at the end of the day, the role of the doctor is not to figure out which out of the 2000 symptoms you're showing, or which of the 500 drugs I need to prescribe to you, or which of the 1000 plus tests I need to do for you. The role is really to say, once all of that is done, what do you really need to cure you? And therefore, the AI algorithm may throw up the kind of the options that may be required to treat you. But truly engaging with you is the role of the doctor, and making you comfortable around the treatment is the role of the doctor. So it's very critical to understand that as we go forward, the roles will define themselves to become even more human, more empathetic, and they will expand. Because as soon as you're able to do this remote healthcare, you can actually treat a lot of people, much more than what we've been treating in our hospitals. And especially in India, in a resource constrained environment where beds, hospitals, and doctors are in a shortage, if you're able to touch far-flung parts of the country and provide healthcare, multiple new jobs will get created as we serve the entire healthcare system in the country. So yes, the nature of the jobs will change, what people will do will change, but in general, it's going to bring in an efficiency layer, an effectiveness layer, which will create many, many new economic, which are outcomes which are positive on employment. But that's again the part of skilling. So people will need to get skilled for those new jobs.
Well said. I think that's very important, and that brings back the whole circle to skilling. Could you share with us? You did talk about a little bit in your brief remarks, but can you share with us a little bit more in terms of what Microsoft in particular is doing in terms of digitally skilling, let's say rural workers, micro entrepreneurs, or even NGOs, and maybe even the student community. Now, these are different target audiences, I realize, but let's take at least the rural workers and micro entrepreneurs and NGOs. What
Again,
kinds of programs?
I'll take a very simple example. We work with the weavers in India. Now, if you look at the weaving community, this is intellectual property that is passed generation to generation in the weaving community on how it is done. But the real tricky part there is the designs and how they are preserved and how they actually are used in future generations. And with the power of AI, we were able to encapsulate a lot of the design capability and train them to work with how they could even evolve the entire design capability. And then suddenly the productivity of the weaving community went up dramatically, because you could use a much faster life cycle of designs, as well as how you could bring a lot of that to in a more sort of production setup to the customers. So that's one key arena. So if you even look at communities that you may feel, hey, what has digital got to do with it? There's actually a lot of power that you can bring, and you're in fact preserving the intellectual property of that community and using AI to help them do faster and better. The second one I would call out is Project Sangam that we launched, and this is primarily for the blue collar worker. Now, very quickly, a lot of people say, hey, listen, you can go to school to get skilling. Now, you talk to somebody who's spending, let's say, a 12-hour day just doing a job and commuting 2 to 3 hours of the day to get from their place of residence to the job that they're doing. And they say, I don't have the time or the allowance to go get skilled, because all my time gets used in the work that I'm doing. And if I don't work, then how do I feed my home? And therefore, I can't get away from this treadmill. And therefore, how do I skill myself? So we launched this Project Sangam, where we said, we observed that a lot of these people, even during commute, had a smartphone in their hands. They had a headphone that they were listening to some music, or they were watching a movie, or they were just spending the time on some entertainment. And we pretty much said, if we can create a very light format education platform in which, if you are a plumber and if you can see some more videos on just plumbing in that commute that you're doing, you'll skill yourself with the new capabilities and opportunities that are available. Similarly, for all kind of vocational skills or any other skills, you can create that that moment where that 2 hour of commute actually becomes a skilling time for a lot of folks. And that, to give you an example where it got used, in a big power company in India, they were recruiting daily wage laborers for a lot of the projects that they were building. And they basically said, when you come at my factory gate to ask for that employment, already there is some very simple videos that are available where you can understand what's the job about. And you can see that video, come to the factory gate, very simple connection, and you can come in and become employable very, very quickly inside my factory. So there are many different ways these platforms can be used to make it more productive for the employer and the employee at the same time, whichever strata of the employment index that that person may be at.
Now, that's a very interesting and an innovative application. If the person can be engaged in watching and yet be learning, I think that's a very innovative and unique thing. But which actually prompts me to another comment, if I may. When corporates look at Microsoft, they look at Microsoft for hardcore products like Windows and a whole bunch of other things. But take the same example of Sangam and the power company. Now, for example, I was personally not very aware of this. So, how would Microsoft bring this kind of initiative, which is a win-win for a corporate? Because you're going to hire contract workers, but you want some basic levels of skills. It need not be digital skills, but it's working skills, right? So how do you amplify and how do you sort of spread that message across corporates? I'm sure you're doing it, but I'm saying that this could be an interesting area. Not much of a question, but it's more an observation to say that if you did that, Microsoft would be more useful rather than just looking at it in the frame of Windows or or Outlook or something like that. Could be something which is very there.
So
one other question.
Sorry,
no, we'll go ahead. No, please go ahead.
No, so very quickly, I would say the way we are doing that is also leveraging the power of the startup ecosystem, and in a way, Atmanirbhar Bharat is the answer to that question. Because Microsoft, given what we do, we create platforms. So we can create a cloud platform in which a lot of these small bite video applications and training applications can be actually kept very securely, and they can work a full ecosystem of learners, whichever company uniquely they may be part of, and so on. So there are many companies today in India, startups, who are coming up with very innovative solutions around this. What we do is we bring these startups onto our cloud platform and encourage them to build it in a way that it becomes more scalable. And then given our connection with a range of companies in the large, medium, small categories across the country, we introduce these startups to the companies. And therefore, the startups are able to then provide those solutions at scale to the companies and solve problems at scale. So our job becomes an enabler of the ecosystem rather than somebody who directly goes and solves on each of these issues individually.
All right. Okay. I think we have time for maybe one last question. There are many, by the way, and just for your information, there are about almost 800 people with us at this time. Some directly on Zoom, a few hundred on Zoom, but several more hundred through YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc. So obviously, your area attracts a lot of interest amongst people here. There is one question which has come up, and which is, really the need for collaborative working between IT companies or tech companies and educational institutions. Now, you did talk about that, in the context of skilling here, to really bring about a much greater thrust on digital skilling and sort of reduce that inequality that exists without, of people who know and people who don't. Would you like to share what Microsoft is doing? Again, just as a point, if I may say that we, from our group had promoted a university which is in Jaipur called the JK Lakshmipati University. And there we do have a Microsoft certificate program, which is run according to your protocol to give certain kinds of basic skills to students who take that program. But having said so, would you like to talk a little bit more about how you're working with
No,
education?
absolutely. This is an area that we are very passionate about and very committed to globally. So just for the benefit of everybody, while we provide a lot of platforms uh, which are uh, uh, which are used by corporates, we pretty much use the same platforms and provide a lot of effective pro bono capability when it comes to education institutes, where we may charge a little bit for the teachers, but bring a lot of the students free onto the platform so that they can learn. Now, we do this across different parts of the education system differently. So when it comes to schools, we would work with all kinds of schools in the country, private, public, and some who are not very well resourced, in totally bringing the entire Microsoft ecosystem platform to them so that the students can find many innovative ways to learn. In fact, just on the 26th of January, one of the students who over the last few years has used Minecraft to actually educate teachers. She's a young girl coming in from Punjab who created a lot of such capability and has got recognized with the Pradhan Mantri Puraskar, one of the unique ones to be given to somebody under the age of 18. It's the highest civilian honor that you could get. So we are finding very innovative ways to create this ecosystem that has not just the traditional educators but new educators. Actually, kids can educate us a lot. They're intuitively digital in terms of how they can pick things up, and therefore make it even more easy for other kids to pick it up. So that's at the school level. Then you go to the college level, like you said, we work with very different kinds of universities and colleges to bring the basic level of tech quotient up across those universities with different kinds of programs. And finally, I mentioned the AI program that we run with ISB, the premier business school in the country, where we also then work with both the students there as well as the mid-career executives coming in who can enhance their digital skills. So we work across the system in shaping this capability.
Wonderful. I think that rounds up a very interesting session. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of AIMA and all the people participating, Mr. Maheshwari, for this very interesting, fascinating, as well as very uh, topical need of digital skilling. And actually, as we said in the beginning, there couldn't have been a more appropriate time. And the COVID pandemic has really accelerated this process to such an extent. I mean, none of us, as you also observed in your opening remarks, would have ever imagined that because of the entire lockdown, work from home, and people, this entire disruption, people would have to learn this very meeting. We would have traditionally called you somewhere, and there would have been a hall which would have X number of people. I doubt it if we would have had a hall which would have had 800 people there. And yet, people have the benefit of doing this. And by the way, in a very efficient time. You talked about commute. Nobody's had to commute from place A to B, whether it's 15 minutes or whether it is 90 minutes to get to a program, and we are able to do this very efficiently. So all of us have learned a lot from this. But I think in a country like India in particular, the need, if we want to take advantage of our demographics, if we want to take advantage of our large market, if we want to take advantage of our large population, we clearly need this much more to make the leap where the government and all of us, not just the government, all of us, the vision we have of having sustained growth rates of 7, 8, 9% year on year would come about only if I suppose we are on that journey. And you also made an important point there that government, that is policymakers, business, that includes companies like yours and everybody else, and civil society, all have to play a part in this journey. So, with those thoughts, thank you once again for being with us at AIMA, and thank you all for joining us. Rekha, any closing comments that you have?
Just want to say thank you, Anant. And if you look at the chat window, you'll see what a hit you have been. There are some lovely comments, and I think I'll just compile them and send them to you. My apologies to all those whose questions we were not able to take, but there were so many questions we would have needed another hour for that. But thanks for doing this for AIMA, and I hope we'll have you more involved in AIMA as we move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mrs. Singhania. It's been a pleasure, and I can say your questions were very, very interesting and provocative for me to think very differently. So thank you so much for doing that. I learned through the session, and
Yeah,
thank you, Rekha, for inviting me.
appreciate it,
Pleasure.
but clarify, these were not my questions. These were AIMA. I'm the amplifier. They have the. I'm the loudspeaker over there in front.
Actually, if
Okay.
you just see the chat, you'll find a lot of questions which we have not been able to take.
Thank you
Yes,
so much, everyone, for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Anand. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening and see you for the next leader.